Hello there, this is Sean McHenry, and I'm going to talk about some libertarian issues that I feel need some clearing up in the public eye. The first issue I'm going to cover is corporations. One thing I hear a lot, which totally baffles me, is when people say that without a lot of government regulations and restrictions, corporations would run our lives for profit, for their own profit, and there wouldn't be any welfare for humanity. But people don't realize that these corporations are more propped up by the government than restricted by them. If limited liability were provided by someone on the free market for what it actually cost, it would cost more and require more stricter regulation than most corporations have today under the government regulation. The government does try to make itself seem like the knight in shining armor when it takes up a corporation that offends quite egregiously, such as Goldman Sachs or BP. But they aren't fixing the root problems. The government's implicit guarantee of bailing out the too-big-to-fail corporations encourages them to engage in risky behavior. The banks, for example, purposefully loaned out money that they knew could not be paid back. Yet it was the bank's self-interest to make bad loans because the implicit protections. Individuals within the banks were making their bonuses by getting the money on the books before the end of the fiscal year, and the American taxpayers paid for their mistakes. It's the classic case of concentrated benefits, dispersed costs from public choice. When you look at the amount of share between the difference between corporate and individual income taxes, we see that government makes more and more on individuals' income taxes than corporations' income taxes. Are we really going to be fooled into believing that the individual benefits more than the corporation from the government? One thing I hear a lot, which is completely intolerable, is that people say that the government is the only thing making sure that the corporations are regulated and don't engage in unfair business practices. But in reality, if these corporations were trying to buy the amount of welfare and the amount of limited liability and these implicit guarantees, this sort of default insurance, if people were trying to buy that for profit on the private market, there would be much stricter regulation and would cost much more money. Here is the classic example that people really need to be cleared up on. Everyone says, oh, well, BP oil made the spill and yeah, our government got them and made them pay. What people don't realize is that our government had enacted something called the Oil Spill Liability Trust Fund, and it limits the amount of damages a corporation can be sued for to $75 million if there's an oil spill. But I think anybody can agree that the BP oil spill off of the coast of New Orleans did much more than $75 million worth of damage, let alone the environmental destruction. The oil companies agreed to a tax of 0.1% of their oil sales for this limited liability. If every affected individual was allowed to sue BP for the damages, it would have been billions of dollars. The government puts on a show, a sort of theater. Oh, we're getting them. We're making them pay. When really it's exactly the opposite. They're making us pay. Special interest politics and lobbying, etc.